Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Brain Bean here again, and today we're going to be taking a look at an updated version of one of my favorite mice of all time, the Deathadder V2. So with that, let's go ahead and just check this thing out. So before we start the video, I do want to address that I've been gone for a couple of weeks, haven't uploaded anything because I actually got sick and lost my voice for a while, which makes making videos pretty difficult. So thank you guys for being patient with me, and I'm excited to be finally putting videos out here again. So like I mentioned, we're looking at the Deathadder V2, and one thing I want to point out before we jump into the actual review of the mouse is that the naming convention here is kind of a little bit confusing. If you look at Razer's keyboard lineup, we got, say, let's take the Black Widow for example. The Razer Black Widow came out first, then we got the Black Widow Chroma, then we got the Black Widow V2, and then we got the Black Widow Elite. What's interesting is on the Deathadder side of things, we got the Deathadder, then the Deathadder Chroma, then the Deathadder Elite, and then finally now the Deathadder V2. So it's kind of flip-flopped. And I could see this being an issue for people that go out to the store and they want to buy similar products of a same naming convention thinking they're getting the same generation of products. So if you go and you purchase the Black Widow Elite, which is the most current gen of the Black Widow, in the Deathadder Elite, well, you're actually getting a generation behind on the Deathadder. So just keep in mind that the newest version of the Deathadder mouse is the V2. So with that, let's go ahead and just jump into the actual physical review of the product. The Deathadder V2 brings the classic Deathadder shape to the level of Razer's other current gen mice. If you're familiar with the major changes we saw introduced with the Viper, then you should have a pretty good reasonable idea of what to expect here, with one or two variations to accommodate for the Deathadder design. First of all, the shape is largely the same. It's still got the great right-handed ergo design that made it one of the most popular mice in the game, but this time Razer has slimmed it down a little bit, making it just under 9mm slimmer in width and 1.3mm shorter in height. The Deathadder V2's dimensions are 127mm long by 61.7mm wide and 42.7mm in height. It's also the lightest Deathadder yet at just 82 grams. Now, a lot of these dimension changes may not really seem like that big of a deal on paper, but for those of you that have been longtime Deathadder users and you're really used to that classic shape, you might notice a bit of a difference here, particularly in the width. Now, for me personally, this is actually a pretty welcome change. I love the ergo shape of the Deathadder, and I thought the Elite was a good release, but I think when really trying to elevate this mouse to the level of Razer's other current gen mice, and considering the trend of mice in the market trying to go with more lightweight, dynamic, kind of quick mice, I think just kind of tailoring these specs a little bit to make this mouse shape a little bit more relevant is actually really smart by Razer. Now, I've been using the Viper Ultimate since its release, and I was worried that going over to the Deathadder V2 would feel a little bit too bulky and big, but the new dimensions do a really great job at addressing this without compromising what makes the Deathadder shape so great. It's still an ideal choice for palm grip users, and because they didn't change the overall length, it's still a really good candidate for claw grip users too. I personally go with a little bit of a modified fingertip grip, you could say, and the new dimensions on the Deathadder actually make it very possible to do that with this mouse too. Overall, I'd say it's the most versatile right-handed mouse in terms of grip style that Razer offers right now. Overall construction feels really good. Even though it's the lightest Deathadder yet, there's no creaking or flex when squeezing on the mouse frame. There is a little bit of wobble on mouse 1 and 2, but it's pretty minor and it is to be expected on longer styles of mouse button like these. Another new addition is the slightly textured sweat-resistant matte finish of the Viper, and the Ultimate variants is now on the Deathadder. It feels nice on the hands and provides a good grippy feel, and I also really like that they changed the rubber grips on the sides of the mouse to be the smaller crisscross pattern that we see on those current gen mice as well. I just think they feel much nicer on the hands. Aesthetically, I'm not super thrilled with the new glossy plastic that's under the scroll wheel because it's just a fingerprint magnet and it can look pretty dirty rather quickly. It's very similar to the glossy bits on the Basilisk Ultimate, which I also had similar concerns about. Now, the Deathadder V2 is advertised as an 8-button mouse. While that's true, that's including the profile button on the underside of the mouse for switching profiles, so realistically it's more of a 7-button mouse functionally. Mouse 1 and 2 have the contoured finger grooves that are typical of the Deathadder shape, and they feel just as nice as always. The new change here is that Mouse 1 and 2 have Razer's optical mouse switches in them for a 70 million click lifespan, and this is a huge upgrade for the Deathadder in particular, as I've personally had 2 different Deathadders get the dreaded double click issue over a couple of years. And the new optical switches completely eliminate this problem because, as I'm sure you guys are aware of by now, the optical switches use light to actuate the keystrokes instead of actual physical mechanical contact points that can corrode and degrade over time, which ultimately leads to that dreaded double click issue. Mouse 4 and 5 still have those nice big side buttons. That's always been one of my favorite parts of the Deathadder design, and these buttons feel mostly the same as before. The scroll wheel has been refined to have a distinct notch scrolling at lower resistance. The scroll wheel here feels good, and I gotta say the click is nice and crisp as well. Behind the scroll wheel are 2 DPI buttons by default, which can be mapped to other functions too. And like all Razer peripherals these days, the V2 does have full Razer Chroma integration with an RGB enabled scroll wheel and the triple-headed snake logo in the grip. Also kind of interesting is the lighting here is noticeably brighter on this variation of the Deathadder than previous versions. Also, in Razer Synapse, you could bind a second set of 7 alternative keybinds to your mouse with Razer's Hypershift, and you can save up to 4 profiles directly onto the mouse's memory. Another really big upgrade to the Deathadder V2 is the inclusion of Razer's new Focus Plus optical sensor. Now this is the same high-end sensor that you're going to see in the Viper Ultimate or the Basilisk Ultimate, so you're getting Razer's top-of-the-line sensor here. Now this is a 20,000 DPI sensor with 99.7% accuracy, as well as all the new smart features that this sensor includes. And these new intelligent functions include smart tracking. Now this does away with the need to manually calibrate the mouse to each new surface you play on. So smart tracking can automatically calibrate itself across different mouse surfaces, ensuring that your liftoff distance and accuracy remain consistent. There's asymmetric cutoff, which allows you to set the distance at which the mouse starts tracking again after picking it up, or basically just configuring your landing distance. And lastly, we have motion sync. Now you could think of this as essentially G-Sync for your mouse. Basically what it does is it aligns your mouse signal intervals to the same rate that the PC extracts information from the sensor for maximum responsiveness. On the underside of the mouse, Razer's new PTFE feet and SpeedFlex cable also make an appearance for some more quality enhancements. And by now I think it's safe to assume that Razer's going to be standardizing these features on all of their devices, which is a really smart move for them as they really do bring a good step up in quality. Now the feet and the cable upgrade are really good enhancements to this mouse, and while the cable isn't quite as good as a true paracord, it's still a big step up from their old previous braided cables, but I do still recommend using a mouse bungee with this one. In terms of performance, I found my hand adapting to the Deathadder shape from the Viper remarkably well. It's like going home after a long vacation, and it all just sort of fell into place. The lighter design is noticeably snappier when playing FPS games, while the ergo shape leaves it feeling plenty comfortable during those long gaming and editing sessions. The new switches and Focus Plus optical sensor gave me comparable performance to my Viper Ultimate, minus the obvious wireless and weight differences of course, but overall I've got to say that the Deathadder V2 is a very solid performer. And I do think it's worth saying that this review could be a little bit biased because I personally have used the Deathadder in some form or another since 2013, so that's 7 years of consistent and happy use with this mouse. I've always enjoyed the shape and found the performance to be quite good. I do think though for $70, what you get with this variation of the Deathadder is incredible. I mean, when you consider that you're getting the redefined shape, the Focus Plus optical sensor is the same sensor on Razer's top-of-the-line mice, the new optical switches which do away with some of the only issues I've ever had with the Deathadder, combined with the new matte finish, the PTFE feet, and the SpeedFlex cable, we're essentially getting the shape that we know and love slightly tweaked with just an overhaul of top-of-the-line features, and at $70, it is an insane price point. So with that, guys, I highly recommend this one if you're looking for a right-handed ergo mouse or you love the Deathadder and you're wondering if the new Deathadder V2 is worth the upgrade. 100%. Absolutely, in just about every single area, it is worth the upgrade. And I really struggled with trying to find anything to really nitpick or find something wrong with this mouse. Anyways, guys, leave me a like if you enjoyed this video, and of course, let me know in the comments down below what you think about Razer's Deathadder V2. I think Razer's still killing it right now, and they're showing that with every single release. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.